You've done everything you were told. You tried hard, you cared deeply, you kept showing up, on time, with a smile, even when it hurt. You've worked to be the responsible one, the kind one, the strong one, and still, something feels off. You feel tired, not just physically, but somewhere deeper, quietly, endlessly tired. Maybe you don't even recognize yourself anymore. You're holding it all together, juggling deadlines, expectations, relationships. But inside, it feels like you're unraveling. You're doing your best. Yet, every day feels heavier than the last. You're not lazy. You're just exhausted from caring about everything. And then comes the voice in your head. You're too sensitive. You care too much. You should just toughen up. But what if that voice is wrong? What if the problem isn't that you feel too much? What if it's that you were never taught how to let go? Right now, you care about things that are slowly, silently draining you. And no one told you that sometimes caring too much can become a kind of cage. Here's the strange truth no one says out loud. The moment you stop caring so much about controlling everything, about pleasing everyone, about doing it all right, is the moment life finally begins to flow. Things fall into place the moment you stop holding them so tightly. The French philosopher Michel de Montaigne lived through war, loss, and deep personal struggle, and still found peace, not by fighting harder, but by letting go of the need to win. He once wrote, "A man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears." In other words, we suffer more from our efforts to avoid discomfort than from the discomfort itself. Montaigne believed that real peace doesn't come from fixing everything. It comes from releasing the pressure to fix it at all. This isn't about giving up. It's about waking up. You're not weak for wanting to stop caring. You're evolving. You're shifting from survival mode to soulful living, from anxiety to clarity, from perfection to presence. And it all starts when you finally stop carrying what was never yours to hold. But here's the hard part. Before we can let go, we have to understand what we've been holding on to in the first place, because the things we carry, they often start with something that looks harmless, even noble. We care deeply. And that care, over time, becomes a trap we don't even notice we've fallen into. You don't just care about getting things right. You care about being good, about being liked, about not letting anyone down. So, you plan ahead, you double check, you overthink, you stay quiet when something bothers you because you don't want to upset anyone. You say yes when you mean no. You stay longer than you should. You carry guilt that doesn't belong to you. And slowly, without noticing, you stop living for yourself. Because somewhere along the way, pleasing others became your survival strategy. Caring, in its purest form, is a beautiful thing. But when it becomes compulsive, when your sense of worth gets tangled up in how much effort you're putting in, it turns into a trap. You care so much about being responsible that you never ask for help. You care so much about being successful that you no longer know what rest feels like. You care so much about keeping the peace that you swallow every truth that wants to be spoken. The world applauds people like this. You're seen as dependable, strong, selfless. But under the surface, you're slowly disappearing. You start to feel like life is something you're constantly managing, not something you're actually living. There's always another task, another expectation, another thing to prove. And the worst part, no matter how hard you try, it never feels like enough. That's the hidden cost of overcaring. It becomes a silent self-erasure. We sabotage our peace in the name of being good. We abandon our truth to protect someone else's comfort. We chase productivity to feel like we're worthy of existing. But what if the endless caring isn't a strength, but a signal? What if it's your soul whispering, "This isn't sustainable"? Because the truth is, caring too much isn't noble. It's exhausting, it's isolating, and eventually, it becomes a form of self-betrayal. We end up overfunctioning in relationships, overcommitting at work, overthinking every interaction, and then we wonder why we feel anxious, resentful, or numb. This isn't weakness. This is burnout disguised as dedication. And if this sounds familiar, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you've been living in survival mode for far too long. The trap of overcaring is subtle because it looks like love, like duty, like success. But at its core, it's a fear of not being enough unless you're constantly doing. And if you've ever felt this, you're not alone. This quiet war between self-worth and over-effort has been going on for centuries. In fact, one man saw it clearly, long before the modern world even had a name for burnout. He didn't escape it by pushing harder. He found peace by walking away from the noise and turning inward. Before there were self-help books and productivity hacks, there was a man who climbed into a tower, shut the world out, and began to write. Not to impress, but to understand himself. His name was Michel de Montaigne. A 16th century French nobleman, Montaigne had everything the world tells us should make us happy: wealth, education, respect. But none of it made him feel grounded. In fact, the more he tried to be everything for everyone, a loyal friend, a good politician, a wise advisor, the more disconnected he became from himself. Sound familiar? After the death of a close friend and a series of political disappointments, Montaigne did something radical. He walked away. He retired from public life, locked himself in his library tower, and began to observe his own mind, not to judge it, not to fix it, but simply to see it. He let go of chasing praise. He let go of pleasing everyone. He let go of being perfectly productive. And in that letting go, he found something rare: clarity. Instead of trying to fit into roles society handed him, Montaigne became curious about what it meant to be fully human. He wrote about fear, grief, love, aging, identity, without trying to sound wise or profound. He didn't claim to have the answers. He just knew the questions were worth sitting with. And in a world that constantly demands we perform, perfect, and push forward, that kind of honesty feels like fresh air. Because Montaigne's great insight wasn't complicated. It was this: the greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. He saw that most of our suffering comes not from the world itself, but from how tightly we grip it, from the way we fight reality, overextend ourselves, and measure our worth through comparison and control. Montaigne wasn't a monk or a guru. He was deeply flawed, often anxious, and constantly questioning. That's what makes his wisdom so powerful. It came from a place of lived imperfection. He didn't try to escape life. He embraced it. Messy, uncertain, and beautiful as it is. And in doing so, he left behind a quiet but radical message. You don't need to do more. You need to come home to yourself. His writings don't tell you how to win at life. They gently ask, what would happen if you stopped trying so hard to win? This is why Montaigne matters today more than ever. Because we're still exhausted by expectations, still trying to outrun our own discomfort, still believing that if we just cared a little more, tried a little harder, everything would finally fall into place. But Montaigne teaches us the opposite. Sometimes things begin to fall into place when you finally let go. In that moment, the quiet letting go isn't loud or dramatic. It doesn't always look like a bold decision or a major life change. Sometimes it begins in the stillness of realizing, I can't keep living like this. There's a strange kind of freedom that sneaks in the back door when you finally say, I can't keep doing this. Not in bitterness, not in defeat, but in quiet honesty. Because when you've spent your whole life caring too much about what people think, about being liked, about meeting every invisible expectation, you eventually reach a breaking point. You look in the mirror and realize you don't even know who you're trying to be anymore. That's when the shift begins. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts in tiny, almost invisible moments. 1. You pause before replying to a message you don't have the energy for and choose silence. 2. You walk away from an argument that no longer deserves your peace. 3. You say no to something small and suddenly feel 10 pounds lighter. The world doesn't explode. You don't fall apart. In fact, for the first time, you feel like yourself again. This is the quiet rebellion Montaigne lived. Not abandoning life, but unlearning the weight of trying to control it. He saw that caring too much often leads to living too little. We overcommit, overthink, and over-identify with things that don't truly matter to us. In the result, anxiety, exhaustion, disconnection. But when we begin to release that grip, something else rises in its place: clarity, calm, presence. Not the numbness of I don't care, but the wisdom of I now care differently. Montaigne once wrote, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." He understood that most of our suffering isn't from real events, but from the constant spinning of the mind, caring about outcomes we can't control, people we can't please, futures we can't predict. And when you stop feeding that storm, something miraculous happens. You notice the present, the way your coffee smells in the morning, the silence between songs, the feeling of your own breath slowing down. You return to the small things, and they're not small anymore. This shift is not about giving up. It's about giving yourself back to what truly matters. It's a realignment, a quiet reordering of values, from proving to resting, from pleasing to being, from exhaustion to peace. And ironically, the less you cling, the more things begin to align. Your energy returns, your relationships deepen, your thoughts quiet down, because you're no longer performing for a world that doesn't notice the performance. You're finally living for something else: truth, presence, wholeness. And that's the shift Montaigne quietly invites us into. Not with commands, but with questions. What are you holding on to that no longer holds you? What are you chasing that doesn't love you back? What could happen if you just stopped? This isn't a collapse. It's a return to your breath, to your boundaries, to your being. And guiding us through that return is a man who lived the questions himself. Michel de Montaigne didn't set out to be a philosopher. He didn't create grand theories or wear a robe of wisdom. He was simply curious about life, about death, about why we suffer, about why, even when everything looks fine from the outside, something still feels heavy inside. And unlike many before him, Montaigne didn't pretend to have all the answers. He turned inward instead. He observed, he wrote, and most of all, he let go. His philosophy was rooted in a single, timeless truth. Peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from accepting it. Let's break that down, not with theory, but with life. 1. Acceptance. Montaigne believed most of our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our refusal to accept them. We want life to make sense. We want people to behave how we expect. We want success to be linear, pain to be avoidable, and happiness to be permanent. But life isn't built that way. So Montaigne practiced the art of yielding, of saying this too is part of being human. Not to give in, but to stop wasting energy resisting what already is. He wrote, "He who fears he shall suffer already suffers what he fears." His point? That our fear of pain is often worse than the pain itself. 2. Detachment. To Montaigne, detachment wasn't cold indifference. It was clarity. It meant recognizing what you can control and what you can't. He pulled back from the noise of public life, from constant comparison, from the pressure to be someone else. He stopped clinging to reputation, to approval, to being right. And in doing so, he became more grounded, more himself. In his words, "My trade and my art is living." He didn't live to impress. He lived to experience, to understand, to be. In today's language, he'd be the one who deletes half his apps, takes long walks, and laughs at the idea that he needs to optimize his morning routine. He detached not from life, but from the illusion of control, and that's what made his peace real. 3. Peace. Montaigne's peace wasn't flashy. It didn't come from avoiding discomfort. It came from seeing discomfort as part of life. He wrote about death not with fear, but with fascination. He saw uncertainty not as a threat, but as a teacher. Peace, for him, wasn't found in perfection. It was found in perspective. He learned to hold life lightly, to observe it, question it, accept it. And from that posture, he found a kind of calm most of us spend a lifetime chasing. So what does this mean for us? It means that the peace we crave might not come from fixing everything. It might come from seeing clearly, choosing wisely, and letting go where we can. It might come from pausing before we react, from breathing before we blame, from stepping back before we spiral. Montaigne wasn't superhuman, he was just deeply honest about being human. And in that honesty, he found a kind of grace that still speaks centuries later. You don't have to renounce your goals or stop caring entirely. You just have to care more selectively about what nourishes you. about what reflects your truth, about what brings you home to yourself. Still, letting go isn't easy, not because the shift isn't right, but because it feels wrong at first. Isn't not caring just giving up? It's a fair question, a natural one. Because the moment you hear someone say, just stop caring so much, a quiet alarm goes off in your mind. Wait, isn't that dangerous? Isn't that giving up on responsibility? Doesn't that mean becoming cold, disconnected, or selfish? You've been taught, maybe your whole life, that caring deeply is a virtue, that effort equals goodness, that pushing through pain is proof you're doing something meaningful. So the idea of letting go feels wrong, even shameful. But here's the truth Montaigne helps us uncover. There's a difference between not caring and caring wisely. Let's unpack that. One, not caring doesn't mean giving up. It means giving up what no longer serves you. Think about the weight you've been carrying, the fear of disappointing others, the pressure to be perfect, the endless cycle of proving your worth. Letting go of those things isn't giving up, it's coming home. It's saying, I'm done abandoning myself just to be accepted. You're not lazy, you're just done burning out for things that don't light you up. Two, not caring doesn't make you heartless. It makes you honest. There's a quiet strength in realizing that some battles are not yours to fight, that you don't have to fix every situation, that you're allowed to choose peace over proving yourself. Montaigne wasn't numb to life. He felt deeply. He just stopped letting every emotion run the show. When you stop caring about approval, you make space for authenticity. When you stop caring about control, you discover flow. When you stop caring about being right, you start listening with openness. 3. People fear detachment because they confuse it with indifference. But detachment isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of perspective. It's knowing that you can love someone deeply and still let them go. That you can work hard without tying your worth to the result. That you can show up fully and still release what you can't control. In Montaigne's world, detachment was a sign of maturity, not neglect. He didn't withdraw from life. He embraced it with clearer eyes and a steadier heart. And maybe that's what we're being called to do now. To stop mistaking exhaustion for virtue. To stop performing strength when what we really need is softness. To stop pushing ourselves to care about everything and start choosing what really matters. Because here's the quiet paradox. The less you force life to make sense, the more it starts to. The less you grip, the more peace slips in. You're not giving up. You're giving in to something deeper, truer, and lighter than the pressure you've carried. And once that realization settles in, a new kind of question starts to emerge. Not, why am I like this? But, what now? You understand the idea now. You've felt the tension of caring too much. You've heard Montaigne's voice urging you toward peace. You've questioned the fear of letting go. But now comes the real question. How do you actually do it? How do you begin to loosen your grip when the world keeps telling you to hold on tighter? Let's begin with this. Letting go isn't one grand act of defiance. It's 100 small decisions you make quietly every single day. 1. You pause before saying yes. You stop automatically agreeing to things just to be seen as reliable or kind. You ask yourself, am I saying yes out of guilt or out of genuine care? Letting go means giving yourself permission to disappoint others so you can stop disappointing yourself. 2. You take breaks without justifying them. You rest, you unplug, you breathe. Not because you earned it, but because you exist. Letting go means understanding that your value doesn't come from how much you produce. It comes from who you are when you're simply being. 3. You stop managing everyone else's emotions. You realize it's not your job to keep the peace, hold the family together, or fix what others won't face. Letting go doesn't mean becoming cold. It means returning their burdens to their rightful owners. You can love people deeply without making their chaos your responsibility. 4. You let silence answer things for you. You don't chase closure, you don't over-explain. You let go of the need to be understood by everyone. Montaigne wrote, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." Letting go means letting the noise pass without jumping in to fight it. 5. You stop proving and start being. You're no longer addicted to achievement as proof of worth. You begin finding joy in doing things for the sake of doing them, not for recognition. This is where peace lives, in the unpolished, unposted, quiet moments where you feel most like yourself. This isn't about escaping life. It's about living it on your terms. And it doesn't mean you stop caring altogether. It means you start caring differently. Less about approval, more about alignment, less about image, more about integrity, less about perfection, more about presence, and most importantly, you forgive yourself when you fall back into old patterns. Because you will. We all do. Letting go is not a one-time act. It's a rhythm, a gentle return, a new way of relating to your own soul. So start small. One decision, one breath, one boundary at a time. Because the more you let go of what doesn't serve you, the more space you make for what does. And in that space, something beautiful begins to arrive. Not all at once, not in fireworks, but in quiet, gentle ways. A little more ease in your breath, a little more clarity in your choices, a little more you coming back to life. And then slowly, a deeper truth settles in. Maybe you were never meant to chase so hard. Maybe life was never asking you to prove yourself. You've spent so much of your life reaching, trying to be more, do more, prove more. You wanted to be the reliable one, the strong one, the one who gets it right. But somewhere along the way, it got heavy. The striving, the second guessing, the pressure to never let anything slip. And now here you are, worn out, tired, not just physically, but soul tired. Tired of caring so deeply about things that no longer feel meaningful. But what if this moment, this exhaustion, isn't a breakdown? What if it's a doorway, a quiet invitation to something deeper, softer, wiser? Because here's what no one tells you. Peace doesn't come when you win the chase. It comes when you stop running. When you stop chasing perfection, you start living with presence. When you stop chasing approval, you start hearing your own voice. When you stop chasing meaning in the eyes of others, you start remembering what already makes your life full. This is Montaigne's secret. Not a grand philosophy carved in stone, but a gentle return to self. He didn't find happiness by building a perfect life. He found it by stepping back from the noise, observing it with curiosity, not control, and trusting that life, left alone, begins to bloom. So ask yourself, what are you chasing right now that's making you feel smaller? What would happen if you let it go, even for a moment? What space would open up? This isn't about quitting, it's about clearing, so what truly matters can rise to the surface. As you finish this video, don't rush to apply anything. Just notice. Notice where you're tense. Notice what you've been carrying. Notice what happens when, for just one breath, you set it all down. You don't need to fix your life in one sweeping move. You only need to loosen your grip, just a little. Because that's when the magic starts. That's when everything begins to fall into place. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped trying to hold it all together. So today, give yourself permission to stop chasing, to rest, to listen, to be, because life isn't waiting for you to do more. It's waiting for you to come home. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, something you didn't have words for until now, share this video with someone who needs to hear it too. And maybe, come back to it when you forget. Because letting go is a practice, not a performance. And every time you return, you come back a little closer to peace,